Closing arguments underway right now in the teen lovers kill grandmother trial.
Now, you remember this one, we've been dipping in and out of it. Uriah Urick is one of these two teens charged in the February killing of the 61-year-old woman. Tara Lynn is the other one, Tara Lynn King. They both, according to the state of Texas, conspired to and did kill King's grandma, Tammy King, during a robbery. The motive here, money.
So let's get you into live court, the start of the state's closing arguments.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be very brief with you guys here. There's only three things I really want to address with you before I'll turn it over to Mr. Agnew and Ms. Willis. The first thing I want to address is the on or about the 6th day of February 2025. I zoomed in there to make it a little bit easier. This is just the first page of the jury charge. The reason I want to address this is because in the indictment it's been alleged that the offense took place on the 6th of February, as it says. But there's been a lot of testimony that states the 5th of February, or perhaps even the 7th. It's a little bit unknown. The reason that we can't really have a precise date is because Miss King's body was discovered long after she was actually murdered. However, the law does not require us to prove specifically an individual date. That's why it has the language on or about. Now here, it's about 1 day difference between what's been alleged in the indictment and what the testimony has been. But in capital murder, because there's no statute of limitations, as long as we proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the murder happened before the case was indicted, it's still legally sufficient. So just because there's a 1 day difference, there is no reason to render a not guilty verdict. That's the first thing I wanted to address. The second thing I want to address is robbery, which is what makes this case a capital murder. And specifically, this is on page 8 of the jury charge, by the way. Robbery is a theft that takes place or is attempted, and in the course of committing it, they either cause bodily injury or threatened bodily injury. Now, in this case, a bullet wound to the head is certainly bodily injury. It would probably be more accurately described as serious bodily injury, but bodily injury is kind of like a lesser included offense of serious bodily injury. So we have that one down pat. One of the issues that might arise, and might be confusing, is whether or not there's a specific order between the robbery and the murder that needs to take place in order to find a capital murder. For instance, whether or not she had to be aware that she was being robbed before murdered in order to get to capital. She doesn't. As we see here, in the course of committing or attempting to commit theft, there's a definition that has 3 separate time frames for the committing or attempting to commit theft. The first is in an attempt to commit theft, which means before the theft occurs, bodily injury takes place. So if she's unaware that the theft is being attempted and she is shot in the head, it's still robbery. If she's actively being robbed and during the commission of the theft is shot in the head, it's still robbery. And if after she had been stolen from, she had a thing stolen from her in the immediate flight afterwards, it's still robbery. So whether the murder took place before the robbery, during the robbery, or after, it's still a capital murder offense because it happened in the course of committing or attempting to commit theft. Now, lastly, what I want to address is going to be on page 9 of the jury charge. Before you may find the defendant guilty of murder, however, you must first find him not guilty of capital murder. So this is just a note on how your deliberations should proceed. You have to start on the issue of capital murder first. And until you have a unanimous decision on whether or not he's guilty or not guilty of capital murder, only in the event of a not guilty on that charge do you even begin your deliberations to the lesser included offense. So you have to start with capital murder. With that, that's all I really wanted to tell you. Make sure you guys understood. I will now turn it over to Mr. Agnew for him to make his arguments.
You have half an hour, Mr. Agnew.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, Ms. Willis, Mr. Reinhardt. On February 4th of this year, we had a 17-year-old girl and we had an 18-year-old boy. And what they wanted was to be an adult. They wanted to be grown up. What they found out very quick after that is sometimes it's best not to get what you want, because they realized that they weren't prepared to be adults at that point. One of the things I want y'all to do when you go back there, you go over all the text messages and Instagram messages and all those messages, is look, I'm not saying that it was right, but they hated her. They absolutely hated her, and they hated living with her. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to say that she was a bad person. I don't mean that at all. She's obviously a good person. She took in her 17-year-old, much younger than that, daughter. But Tara obviously had to have some problems in her family to end up having to live with Grandma. And Grandma was gracious enough to take her in. And she ends up being repaid in a horrible fashion. But the thing is they thought that they were ready to be adults. And if you read the messages, they had a lot of hatred towards her. And they sort of fed each other. They fed the monster, and they went after her. But if you also look at their messages, and you look at the videos, they had access to all that stuff before this ever happened. And they did. They had access to the guns. Why else would there be a gun behind the couch? It wasn't in the safe. It was out. They had access to the codes. And they could say, well, it was on a piece of paper, you know, in a dresser or whatever, but they had access to that. They did from the word go. There's a text, if y'all remember, or an Instagram message where they refer to, you know, about basically the fact that, you know, Grandma hasn't tried to tighten up the money thing yet. That she's still being very free with them with the money. I'm not asking y'all to find my client not guilty. I mean, I'm not asking you to do that at all. What I'm asking you to do is look at the facts. And I understand where they're coming from with the robbery and all that other stuff, but they actually did have access to all that stuff. They did all along. And they didn't kill her to take her stuff. And they didn't. The reason they killed her is because they were, in all honesty, they were incredibly naive. And they were also, so if you remember, they were also using meth. And that has a tendency of doing very bad things to your brain. It's not an excuse, but it does bad things to your brain. But they weren't killing her to rob her. They were killing her because they wanted to be adults. And think in terms of what Tara said when they were talking about, because they were talking about killing her. There's messages all over the place. You know, y'all saw them, I saw them. They were all there. But what did Tara say was one of the things that she wanted to take with her? Her stuffed animals. She wanted to take her stuffed animals. What did she not take with her? Her stuffed animals. She realized very quickly, as they both did, they were not prepared for this life. They couldn't drive. They didn't have jobs. They had nowhere to live. They had to depend on other people to come get them. They depend on other people to get rid of stuff. They made a decision that not only ended one life, but effectively ended three, because they were not prepared for the situation that they put themselves into. And no matter what y'all do, their lives are over. And it's by their own hands. I'm not going to try and excuse that. Their lives are over. It's just going to be a matter of how. How over are their lives? And that's the decision that y'all have to make when you get back there. Like I said, you're talking about an 18-year-old kid. He was less than a month being 18 years old. And he made the absolute worst decision he could possibly make. And I'm not trying to excuse him. And I'm telling you that right now. I'm not asking you to find him not guilty at all. What I'm asking you to do is to go back there and find him guilty of murder. Because like I said, from the word go, they had access to all this stuff. I mean, Grandma's 62 years old. I'm sure she ran a pretty loose ship as a parent, because that's not a grandma's job. Grandma's there to be fun. They're supposed to be fun. That's why most everybody loves their grandmothers.
And moms are supposed to be a little bit more stern. And she had to go from being grandma to mom at an older age than I think most people want to do that. And Tara didn't like it, and Uriah didn't like it. Not saying that what they did was right. It's not right at all. What they did was horrible. But I think at this point, when you look at it, to say that they killed her to take her stuff is wrong. They killed her because they wanted to be adults. They wanted to be on their own. And immediately learned they weren't prepared for it. And they weren't. They learned real fast. Sometimes it's best not to get what you wish for. And the thing is they're going to have to live with that for the rest of their lives. I know this has been a really, really long week. And I apologize to y'all for that. This has been a long week for all of us. I appreciate every single bit of attention that y'all have given to all of us during this process, and I mean that in all sincerity. But when you go back there, I'm asking you to please find him guilty of murder and not the capital murder. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your verdict.
All right, just laying it out there.
Not the kind of closing we usually see, but I like the ownership and the embracing because the evidence is stiff.
Yeah, and gives probably some jurors something to think about. Let's get a break. When we come back, we'll have the remainder of the close. The state gets, of course, that rebuttal, plus Vegas, baby, coming up. It's the Michaels trial. Boy, this one is something else. Stay with us.
Sunday nights on Court TV. Join us for a night of food, friends, and our favorite legal dramas. It's Order in the Court. And this week, we're binge watching Bull. Sundays on Court TV.
Let's go back to a Texas courtroom where we are following the closing arguments in the teen lovers kill grandmother murder trial. And the defense just asked this jury to, yes, find their client guilty of murder, but not capital murder.
Yeah, don't hear that often. You see the clock is ticking. The jury has this. The closing arguments were incredibly short in this case. We just finished with the defense. 18-year-old Uriah Urick and his 17-year-old buddy, Tammy King. They're both accused of robbing and murdering King's grandmother earlier this year. They have split these trials. So Urick is going first, King will go later. Let's go back in now, pick up the remainder of the state's close. Remember, they start, they get the rebuttal.
Yeah, the rebuttal.
So here we are with the rebuttal from the state.
Let's roll, so you have 26 minutes remaining.
Okay, sure. May I go back to that?
Yes.
They killed her because they wanted to be adults. If she comes in, I'll kill her. Can I kill her at 4? I have an inch of hundreds. I'm going to kill her. On and on and on and on and on. Mr. Agnew just said that they killed her because they wanted to be adults. That they didn't kill her to rob her. Don't take my word for it. Take Uriah's. I go in, threaten to get any and every phone. They did that. Tell her to move, grab the key ring out of her room, tell her to open everything I haven't. We know those safes are open. He's admitting he'd already opened some. Kill her when done, get someone to drive the Ford. They killed her, and they got a ride. To say that Tammy King is dead because she had to be a mom and they wanted to be adults is so disrespectful to Tammy King's life. This woman took in her granddaughter, raised her since she was young. It does not matter what happened to make Tara King be living with Tammy King. Families have different situations all the time. That does not give anybody the excuse to shoot Tammy King. Tara lived with her grandmother for her entire life, and things were fine. Where it went south, where I told you that that young love turned into something dark, was when that man came into her life. He is young. He is 18 years old. But in this country, that makes you a man. He is an adult. That thing that his defense says he wants to be, he is. And he has to face the repercussions of his decisions that he made as an adult. This was a thought-out plan. This was a fantasy that turned into a need that turned into action. We see as early as November, when Tammy's out of the room, they're seeing what's in those safes. They're taking pictures of the safe codes. They're setting up their ability to execute their plan. You see then moving into 11 days prior to the murder, the 26th of January, they start talking. This is what we need to do. We need to kill her. We need to rob her. We're going to take these antique coins. We're going to take this money. The other thing Mr. Agnew talked about was that they had access because there was guns behind the couch. There were guns behind the couch that were still there. Any of you who have lived in a home, just because you have access to something does not mean you have permission to take it forever. Does not mean you have permission to murder someone to take their items. Access we can give to Tara King because she lived in that home. Still doesn't give her permission to take things. Still does not give her permission to go into safes. You know who didn't have permission to live in that home? The man squatting under a desk in a teenage girl's bedroom, peeing in urine bottles to hide from the owner of the home. That's not access. That's squatting and robbery. You saw as it got further in time that yes, Tara and Uriah started utilizing drugs. They hated Tammy King. Hated her. That is not an excuse for murder. That is not an excuse for robbery. You saw through the cash app returns that Detective Scott testified to that Tammy actually gave any money that Tara needed to her. If she requested something, she got it. Taco Bell, a phone case. That didn't mean she got the $10,000 that her late grandfather had left her. It was an inheritance. She had to wait. This was impatience and greed. You saw the firearms. These are not run-of-the-mill cheap firearms. These were nice firearms. You heard Detective Hudson testify to they were expensive firearms. They were valuable. They knew they were valuable, and you can see that from their messages offering to sell them to people. That was a cash value for them. We'll give you $1,000 or guns for a ride. We'll give you guns or $300 to stay the night. And as those 11 days leading up to February 5th came, you see their plan get more and more substance. You see Tara said, we need a few days in a stable plan. I want to pack. And yes, she wanted to pack her stuffed animals, but they also wanted to pack the guns, and the cash, and the antique coins, and their methamphetamine. They wanted to pack all kinds of stuff. Her wanting to pack stuffed animals does not absolve them. As those days move closer, you see Uriah begin begging to commit this plan. It stopped being a fantasy. It stopped being a desire. 3 days before, I went to watch a 5.56 shred through someone's skin in slow-mo. He only had to wait 2 days to watch that come to reality. When he picked up the 5.56, and he pointed it at Tammy King's head, and he pulled the trigger. He made his fantasies reality. We get closer. I'm going to kill her. I hope I get an excuse to kill her today. Can I kill her at 4? Let's do it at 5. We're going at 7. We ride at dawn. This was planned. This was intentional. As Mr. Reinhardt told you, the order in which these things happened doesn't change that they happened. That safe was empty. You hear testimony from Mr. Utton that they did not have access to that safe. Those guns, that money, it all belonged to Tammy King. That safe was empty. You heard that from Investigator Martin. You heard that from Detective Hudson. You heard that from Detective Espinoza. You heard that from Detective Bernard. It was empty. It was gone. The initials on the items that were in there, the ammunition boxes, said JK. It was J.C. King. It was Tammy's husband. More than just seeing this, you saw Uriah already trying to formulate what excuse he would give. When he's talking to his friend Jen Landry a few days prior, he's talking about if he kills someone else, he'll just say it's self-defense if someone came into the house. Because what's the first thing that he said to his mother when he called her from Laredo? It was self-defense. She was going to stab Tara. You have heard absolutely zero evidence that Tammy ever laid her hands on Tara, that Tammy ever attempted to stab Tara. Tammy is laying naked in her bed. His words to his mom are, it was self-defense. But he already had told Travis, it doesn't look like self-defense. Because it's not. A lesser of murder would be an injustice in this case. Because so much more than just Tammy's life was taken. Yes, 3 lives are permanently affected by this. But so are many, many others. All of the items that got systematically taken from Tammy King, the antique coins that were in their backpack in Laredo, the $5,400 still in crisp $100 bills that came from those inches of hundreds that he talks about, that stack of money Rigoberto saw him pull out, start calling friends over as soon as the murder was done, that is robbery. The robbery, the theft that occurred while causing bodily injury. As Mr. Reinhardt told you, bodily injury absolutely counts when you have a gunshot wound to the head that is fatal. Uriah Urick launched a plan. He had his dark fantasies, he had his dark desires, and he moved forward. He begged and begged until he had his opportunity, until he had his excuse. He had his ride set up, he had where they were going, he had all the people he could reach out to. And on February 5th, 2025, he went into Tammy King's room and he shot her in the head. He covered her with linens so that Tara didn't have to see the face of her dead grandmother while they robbed her blind. And then they sat there for hours in the home with Tammy King's body while they waited for a ride. Then they ran away to Laredo, where you see them still calling and texting people. You see messages like, this is the start of the rest of our lives. We're making bank. We live happily. There is no other verdict appropriate in this case than guilty on capital murder. Thank you.
All right, wrapping it up. State saying, no, this is not just murder, it's capital murder, laying out the reasons why. In the end of their closing arguments, you can see the jury clock ticking away. They've been at it about a half an hour. And I think all they're talking about is whether it's murder or capital, obviously, because that's what the defense told them.
And to let our viewers know, capital murder in Texas, the only thing they can have as a punishment is life in prison or the death penalty. This isn't a death penalty case, but if it's murder, then there's a range. There's an opportunity for him to get something less than life.
Yeah, and maybe the age of the defendants could factor in there. I don't think the defense attorney did a great job of articulating that. You know, to take
they wanted to be adults. That was the
it's
excuse.
Almost counterintuitive to that argument. Eric Schwarzkopf is watching along. Schwarzreich is with us. He's in Fort Lauderdale, as he always is, on a Friday. All right, what's your take here? This is one of those cases where the young man's going to prison, but it's a matter of what this jury decides. What do you think's going to happen, and what stood out to you?
Ted, Julia, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So it's just a question of time. It's a matter of time. I mean, the state of Texas is seeking capital murder in this case. And as Julia said, while it's not a death penalty case, what matters is it's not a whodunit, it's a what was done. Is this capital murder, which would, if the state gets that conviction with the aggravators on the robbery, with what happened here, and you heard the state attorney, both different state attorneys do an excellent job outlining some of the aggravators, because what matters, if that jury comes back and decides capital murder, are they going to come out of a Texas prison in a pine box, or is their life going to have some hope? They are young, and Ted, as you said, it is a little counterintuitive to hear the defense argue that they acted like adults. This was an adult thing, because age, how young they were, their teens, 18, it is a mitigator. But I think the point that the defense was trying to get across is that while they were teens, they were trying to be adults, but yet they were still teens. So we're looking at aggravators, we're looking at mitigators. What's it going to be? Life in prison or possibility of parole?
See, I like how Eric said it, that they were trying to be adults, but they were not, and the emphasis there. I don't know if it came across quite the same way with the defense, but we will see. That jury, they're still out 30 minutes. They've had this case, and when they actually come back with a verdict or a question, we'll take you there live.